Our scripture reading today is in our message, and since it's Father's Day, we don't have a message today, so go home. That's my Father's Day gift to me. But how many can we relate to this statement? It was made by Mark Twain long ago about his father. He said, "When I was a boy of 14 years old, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to be around that old man. But when I got to be the age of 21, I was astonished at how much that old man learned in 7 years." I think we can all relate to that as kids or fathers or whatever, that we think our parents are just so out of touch with the things going on today. And then as we go older, we decide we get more like our parents all the time. And the worst thing when we were young is for somebody to come up to you and say, "You look just like your dad," or "You act like your dad." And you would just cringe and go, "I'm not like my dad at all." But it's amazing that as we grow older, we become more like our parents, and it actually becomes a compliment that we're like our parents. Which most cases, when we do act like our parents, is a very good thing. Now, there was a small group of children that were asked in a survey, what were the most common statements that were made by your dad? The first one is, and we've all heard this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you. We've all heard that one before. The next one is, why? Because I said so. Number 3 is, you better pick up your toys before your mother gets home. Number 4, just wait till you have children of your own. Number 5 is, don't tell your mother. And the last one, we all heard our dads and grandfathers say, "I wasn't asleep, I was just resting my eyes." We all know that fatherhood is not for the faint of heart. Just like being a mother, it's hard being a dad today. You're supposed to know when your kids want you to be around for support, but you're also supposed to know when to leave them alone without one word actually being said. You're supposed to know when to intervene and to know when to leave the situation alone. I know that I've said this in past Father's Day messages, but it's always so funny to me, as I remember as a child, and even today as you watch TV and you watch these commercials, it always makes the dad out to be just such an idiot. You know, they're like, I don't know if you've seen that internet commercial where the guy punches the holes in the walls because he gets better connections with the internet. But that used to make my dad so mad. He'd say, "Well, I'm smart enough to give you guys a home and give you food on the table, but otherwise I'm an idiot." And he used to get so mad that it made all of our kids, we laughed because it made him so mad. Many surveys have been done over the years, though, also, about parents who stay together, who stay married, and stay involved in children's life. And when they do that, their success rate is highly greater than those that are divorced or have a single parent. So today we celebrate all of our fathers. We give thanks to our dads, past and present. And today I want to look at 3 things that we should thank our dad for. The first one is, we need to thank him for material provisions. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, "If you do not provide for your relatives, or especially for your immediate family, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." That's a pretty powerful statement if you think about it. If a father does not provide for his family, if he doesn't give them food, shelter, and clothes, he is denied the faith of Christ. That's a lot of weight if you think about it on a man's shoulder. But this seems to be a problem across America today. In many cases, so many men do not take responsibility for their children. The thing is that they had them. They need to take care of them, not you or me or the government. They need to take care of their own children. But the problem is, this is also a two-way street. Because even when we stay together with our wives and we're married, sometimes we think we fail as a father because we didn't give our kids enough, or we didn't give them the best of everything. We all want the best for our children. I think every parent wants that. God knows that I spoiled my kids to death when they were living at home. But material things aren't always what a child needs. A successful father is someone who is around their children. A successful father is someone who sets a good example for their children. A successful father is someone who gives them a safe place to live. And that is so important today for children, to give them a safe place to live. It doesn't have to be the biggest or newest house on the block. It just needs to be a place where they can call home. As the Lord says, do not store up your treasures on earth. Your treasures are in heaven. There is nothing more important, as I said before, for a child to have a safe atmosphere. Some of the wealthiest men in the world can be the worst fathers because they're never around their children. They're jet-setting all over the world, and someone else is raising their children. So you don't have to have money to be a good father. Money doesn't just automatically make you a good father. Now, we all like to do more for our children. I know I would love to do more for my children. But sometimes just spending a little time with them is worth more than anything else in the world. I think I've said this before a few times, but one of my favorite movies is a Christmas movie called Holiday Inn. And it stars Bing Crosby and Marjorie Reynolds. And Bing Crosby had asked her when they were sitting by the fireplace, he was asking her about her father. And he said, "What was your father like?" And she said, "Well, my father never amounted to much. He was just a hard-working man." But Bing Crosby then asked her, he said, "Were you happy as a child?" And she said, "Oh, yes, we had everything that we needed." Just a simple, honest man who gave their kids what they needed, a home, food, shelter, clothing. Sometimes that's all you need. I've read this story, and when I read this story and saw this movie, it's always stuck with me in my heart, and I thought, boy, that was the way I would want to be remembered. It was in a movie or a mini-series called Band of Brothers, and it was about Easy Company in World War II, and it took the men, there was 10 sessions of this movie, and it took the men from basic training of World War II all the way to the end. And in the beginning, it would talk to the real men of Easy Company, and this was all a true story. But there was one particular man, as I said, that I will never forget. And I wanted to be remembered like this man, and I think a lot of us would like to be remembered the same. I don't remember what his name was, but after the war, he went back to his small hometown, and he became a simple handyman. Everyone knew him. They loved him dearly. He was a great example for his children. He was a simple, hard-working man. He would do anything for anybody, whenever they asked. When he died, over 1,600 people attended his funeral in that small town. That's a sign of a good man. Can you imagine? I mean, how many times have we decided to go to a funeral and we've seen a long line out of the funeral home and we thought, oh, I'll just say my condolences later, and we keep driving. But 1,600 people stood in line to pay their respects to this man. You don't have to change the world. Just change a small part of it to be a successful father. Another thing we should thank our fathers for is faithful instructions. Ephesians 6:4 says, "Fathers, do not exasperate your children. Instead, bring them up in the training and instruction of the Lord." Our job as a parent is to bring our children to know God. Teach them about God. Instruct them the laws of God in the way that God wants them to act and be good citizens. Parenting today is very difficult because there are so many distractions out there in the world today. We have video games, we have the internet, we have cell phones, and it seems like half the time you go and see your children or friends, they're all on their cell phones or they're doing something on the computer. It's very hard for us today to get into that wedge and give them some teachings of God. And more parents have to work harder than they ever did before, leaving less time to be with your children. That's why it's so vital to bring your children and grandchildren to church. At least we can get an hour a week into their minds and teach them about God. We need to teach our children to love God, to respect others, to love others as Christ loved us. Treat people the way that you want to be treated. And something else that seems to be going on in America today is many parents are living their life through their children. And a great example of that is through sports. We seem to live our lives through our children because of some reason. I don't know why. But there was a soccer group in Ohio that told the parents they couldn't watch the games anymore. They had to sit in their cars in the parking lots because the parents were out of hand. Now, what does that teach the kids? Not a whole lot. I'll tell you, I ref basketball for 17 years in high school and junior high, and there was one incident, I probably ref a couple of thousand games over those years, but there was one incident that has always stepped out of my mind. I was doing an 8th grade basketball game, which doesn't mean anything. It's not a high school game, it's not a college game, just a simple 8th grade basketball game. So I called a foul on this boy, and the boy came up to me very politely and said, what did I do wrong? Exactly what the boy should have done. I talked to the boy, I said, well, this is what you did. It was quiet, and the next thing you heard was his mother yelling from the stands saying, you tell him, Johnny. And I thought, what does that teach a child? The child did exactly what he was supposed to do, respected authority, asked what he did, and his mother ruins the whole thing. Living their life through a child. And sometimes when in the games that I did, when the parents would yell from the stands, they were either saying the opposite of what the coaches were telling the kids to do, or they were telling the kids and the kids didn't want to hear what their parents were saying. And the thing is, most of the time, all the children want is for you to be there. Cheer for them. Teach them sportsmanship. Teach them that calls go both ways. It's just part of the game. But as I said before, most of all, just be there for your children. And the worst thing that you can do is when they get into the car is start to nag on them for something they did wrong. Don't do that. If they want to talk about the game, let them talk about the game. If not, don't worry about it. Teach your children that life is not always fair sometimes. And try to resolve the situation that they're in peacefully as the Lord would want us to do. If more people would raise their children through the church and teach them about God, I believe that the world would be a more peaceful place to live. Now, sports is a wonderful thing. I love sports. Watch them on TV all the time. But God is the key to life. Is it more important to teach your child about Christ and salvation? Or is it more important to teach them how to dribble a basketball? I think that's pretty easy. And it is God who is going to see us further than life than a basketball will. On a side note, it also said children that are raised faith-based also have a more successful rate of a successful life. The next thing we should thank our dads for is godly illustrations. What I mean by this is we need to show our children how to live a godly life by the examples of what we do. 1 Corinthians says, Paul said to the Corinthians, who were his children in faith, follow my example, as I follow the example of Christ. Now, we just talked a little bit about teaching our children about God. Now we have to show them and lead by example. Paul never said he was perfect, and neither are we. And just like Paul, he did wrong things, and we do wrong things too. But most of the times, if we follow the examples that Christ set for us to follow, we can show our children the benefits and the blessings that come with following Christ. As I said before, we're not perfect and we never will be. We will make mistakes even when we try to follow Christ's example. But when we fall and make a mistake, it's not always a bad thing. We don't always have to hide it from our children. We can learn from those mistakes that we made. We can pass them down to our children so they can learn the experience and maybe they won't make the same mistake we did. There was a man who always visited people that were shut-ins in their house. And one day he walked into his son's bedroom and said, "Let's go, son." And the son asked, "Where are we going?" And he said, "We're going to go to Lucy's house." Lucy was a shut-in who was a cripple in a wheelchair. But once a month, the dad would pick her up, take her to church for communion. He thought this was a good example for his son to see. A few months later, this man had a massive heart attack and was recovering in the hospital. But while he was in the hospital, he heard that a family down the street didn't have enough money to buy food. So this amazing man, while laying in the hospital bed, wrote this check out and made sure and sent it to the family so they could buy groceries. It was the last thing that man ever did, and this is a true story. He died later that afternoon in the hospital. But what a lasting memory, and what a lasting example he did for his family and for others to see, that even as he was laying, recovering, he still thought about other people. And just think, it's just like Christ when he was on the cross. Forgive them. He thought about other people. Forgive the Roman soldiers. Forgive the people. They don't know what they're doing. This amazing man sent these people a check while he was on his deathbed. But as I said, what a lasting memory and an example for his child. I did a sermon a couple years ago on a movie called The Blind Side. And if you have seen the movie or heard about the movie, it's an extraordinary example of a well-off southern white family that took in a basically black homeless man who was still in high school. They raised this young man as their own, getting him through high school, getting him into college, and eventually he went on to play pro football. Never asking anything in return, just doing the work of God and showing their own children a great example of what a Christian should do for other people. As I said, it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. But parents, we have to remember that we are the best teachers and examples for our children. It's a great responsibility for us. If we're a bad role model, if we show them bad things, for example, they're most likely going to follow in our footsteps. But there is no greater gift, no greater joy than when we are blessed with a child from God. And you have more influence over that child's life than anyone else in the world. But also for children, your parents work hard and they do the best that they possibly can. You might not think that they're doing as great as your friend because your friend's got a bigger house or a better car, but we have to remember it doesn't matter. All that matters is that your parents love you and will always be there for you and stand by you just like God stands by you too. And I know that for many of us in my generation and the generation before, for some reason, it was always very hard for our dad to say that they loved us. We all can kind of relate to that. We all knew that they loved us, but they could never really say it. Well, what I say is tell them that. If your dad's still alive, if your child is still alive, say you love them. And hopefully they'll say it back to you. Did you know that the busiest day for phone calls is Mother's Day? More than Christmas, more than Easter, more than any other day. Well, today is Father's Day. And I encourage you to pick up the phone, call your dad, call your son, just talk to him for a few minutes and say hi. Tell him you love him. Thanks for being your father, or thanks for being your son.